Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something along the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. And if you're enjoying the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow if you're watching or listening. Also, if you or anybody you know would like to come on and have a conversation with me, feel free to reach out to me on all the different social media. And the best way that you can find me is isaacl.dev. All right. So with that, this is a really exciting episode for me, and we'll get into why in a second. But this is something that, it's been 20 years in the making. So my guest today is Dave Grundgeiger. Dave, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Yeah. So I am a software developer. I've been working for about 35 plus years in that field. I live in the Hollywood Hills area of Los Angeles. Work primarily in C# and Azure, but as you can imagine, I've a lot of platforms in the past 35 years. Wrote a couple of books and magazine articles years ago. Haven't done that in a while. Got an interest in artificial intelligence. I think we're going to be, and that's it.
Yeah, no, and I'm looking forward to this, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. But how I want to start is how you got started. So we love talking about origin stories in this show. So do you remember when technology first introduced itself to you and you realized it was like the thing you wanted to work on or work with?
Strange story. I was maybe around 12 years old, and that was, I guess to date myself, that was in the area that the Radio Shack TRS-80 Model 1 was brand new. And I saw an advertisement, I don't know, it must just have been the effective way that they talked about balancing your checkbook on a computer, that I was literally hooked for the rest of my career reading that advertisement. I can't explain it, but like I was talking to my parents, we have to, et cetera, and that was really the, where that got started.
So what do you think it specifically? Like, do you think it was, were you, as a kid, were you kind of a curious person? Like you kind of wanted to know how things worked? Was there a little bit of that?
Definitely.
Like you saw like the potential of things that you could do with it? Like, I'm curious because, I think when I've done this show for long enough, I think a lot of people in tech have very similar traits as to like, we kind of need this, like, we need to understand how things work. And technology is one of those things where like, you can figure out how much things work, like all the way down to like writing firmware and writing operating systems and all of that sort of stuff, right?
So yeah, I was definitely one of those kids that was taking things apart. Actually, this is I feel bad about this to this day, but I remember assembling my mom's slide projector and then putting it back together, and then there's the inevitable part where I have pieces that I don't seem to know where they go, and so it was broken from that point. To my mom, why? And I didn't get in trouble. I'm like, why did you let me do that? Like, she even observed me doing that. She's like, I figured if you take enough things apart, there's going to be the day where you figure out how to put them. Like, that's a parenting lesson right there.
Yeah, that's great.
But yeah, I really and then yeah, when I got a little older, my dad was in electronics, so he got me started there, and so I did. I learned about electronics together, and there was a great company back then called Heath Kit, Health Kit, and they made electronic, kits of electronic components that do various things, like radios was an things like that. So I got to do some of those, and so I learned a bit about electronics. And then I saw that infamous TRS-80. From there, I started buying, books about the TRS-80. So we didn't have, like, this was the 70s. So like, we didn't have a personal computer at home. They were available by that time, but almost nobody had them. And and the adult checkbook, I don't need a computer.
Yeah, sure.
And so yeah, a lot of reading, tried to learn some things, didn't really understand everything I read, but I came along with it. And then when I got into high school, so I was 13, 14 by that time, they had a computer room with terminals that dialed up to the downtime, and I could program in BASIC. And so that did my programming career.
That's great. That's great. So I have a similar story. Like
Yeah.
I got, so we got our first computer when I was like a sophomore in high school, and like we
There you
grew
go.
up like we didn't have a lot of money, so we had to get the computer on layaway, and we finally got it. And
Nice.
being somebody who was 15 or however I was at the time, it's like, oh, I'm gonna open it up and see what it looks like. And I remember I took everything out.
There you go.
I took the RAM out. I took everything out, and I remember that was that was the second day we had it. And
Yeah. Oh, no.
my dad like comes into the room, he looks at it, and he just looks at me. He's like, "Fix this now."
Ah,
And and so I mean, different parenting lesson, right?
yeah.
But I mean, similar to you.
So
Like
good.
I was just
And did you fix it?
yeah.
Okay, good. Good.
I had that HP compact for a long time.
Okay,
But
good.
yeah, like it was one of those things where I just needed to know how it worked, because to me it was kind of like I was magic. Like I had like we played, like we had Apple IIs in when I was in like elementary school. We were playing on those, and I was always generally curious, but it was always like like it was just a box on a desk, and you can type and you can click and you can do all these things. And
Yeah.
once I had my own quote unquote my own computer, I very much was like, I need to understand. And when I opened it up, nothing, like I think to you similar, it's like nothing really made sense. And then eventually I kind of figured everything out. And
You figured out.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
I'm not
Quick to
quite
say
one of
sure
the,
how to
about it
help you
like
with that.
being magic as well, because um, I often think of programming as casting spells. Like you're putting
sure.
words together, and if you put them together, you can do anything.
Yeah, no, I mean it is very akin to like there is a little bit of, secret recipe to be able to write code. That's for sure. I think, also one thing that I've learned over time is like there's so much art to like, being in tech and writing code. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that all of the code that you write is elegant and whatever, but like there is creative process that goes into it.
Oh,
Yeah.
big time.
And especially if you're building something that's complex, right? Like if anybody who's ever like gone through like coding interviews or like, delete code or any of those things, you have to understand like these very intricate algorithms to like solve problems that in your head are like, oh, like that's kind of like a basic thing. And then you actually try to write it out like the very, rote way. And it's like, oh, I can't do it with loops and conditionals. I have to use some other weird mechanisms, right? So there
Sure,
is
sure.
some, yeah. And I think that's always been what's so fascinating me about technology is like, it is so like the level of complexity that you can get to is so high, or you can be not complex at all. Like, you can, there's a world today where you don't even need to know how to code to like build really interesting applications,
Yeah,
or
totally
you can,
agreed.
yeah. Or you can go all the way down and write assembler, right? It's a fascinating area to kind of focus in. And I imagine a lot of, job fields or industries have similar kind of vein, but with technology, I
Yeah,
this is kind of my go-to. It's like we're tricking sand to be intelligent,
love that.
right?
That is
And
fantastic.
and
I'm gonna use that, Isaac. That's good.
because it's so
Yeah,
true. Like it's
it's completely
yeah.
true.
So
It's like, when my kids were little and they were into Harry Potter, I used to say, life is life is just like Hogwarts. It's like like you say, we're tricking sand. It's like, you imagine these kids at Hogwarts and a thing happens. It's like that's exactly what we
yeah,
have these
yeah,
pieces of glass in our pockets where we can look at somebody else's piece of glass on the other. We truly live in a magical place and time.
yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I can't agree with that more. So I want to kind of go back to, Dave growing up. When did you realize that
Yeah.
there was like a job in tech? Did you realize that pretty quickly, or did you think that, oh, like this computer thing, it's fun, but like I probably have to go be an accountant or whatever job that.
So I never, and I'll say why in a second, but again, it was parental lessons from my mom. I never got the message to be.
Mm,
I always got the question, what are you interested in? And now I was interested in something that ended up being something people wanted to pay me to do. But that wasn't intentional. Programming, I loved what I was doing, and then I probably in my later high school years that was actually a career that I could follow. But even so, like when I ended out my college and so on, I was never thinking, oh, I need to pick these courses for the job I want. I was always thinking, oh my God, this sounds magical and interesting. I have to take this database class.
Yeah.
So that's how I was thinking. But like to really answer your question, like when did I realize that I could make money doing that? It would have been, late high school, early college. Probably.
So when you decided to go to school, it wasn't even a question. Like it's computer science, it's tech, it's whatever. Like or bust. Like I'm going to live out of my car if I don't, get a degree and get a job as a developer or a software engineer.
Yeah, no, it was really, what is the knowledge that I wanted to have, out of personal interest. And actually, interestingly, it wasn't originally, even though I was in computers, like I wasn't thinking of getting a degree in computer science originally. A deep interest in physics, and so I was thinking, oh, I want to be a theoretical physicist. Because again, like physics is like learning the magic of how the universe works.
The
like,
magic of the cosmos, for sure.
Magic all the way down. Absolutely. So, but yeah, then I ended up just taking comp sci courses. So, and in that field.
Cool. I mean, I think it worked out for you pretty well. When did so obviously you go to school and you get your first job.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first program you had to write?
Well, yeah, professionally, yeah. So it's interesting because it was while I was still in college, I actually as a computer operator, so not as a developer, but just it was like a second shift job of running a credit union. Actually, they're running their second shift operations and whatever. So, but then they had a situation where they did certain reporting once a year to CUNA, the Credit Union National Association. That credit union was small enough where they just did this reporting by hand. So they had like these 1,212 accounts that satisfied this thing they needed to report. So they would run a report off of their mainframe of these 1,200 accounts, and then they would type the data, retype the data that was supplied by CUNA, and then they would send them the disk or whatever. And so I was like, if you're sending them a disk, there's some data format.
Sure.
And if we're printing a report, we can get that data. So I stayed late one night and spent several hours just writing my own program to sort of take that text file, parse it up, and then write. The way I got that was we had contacts inside of CUNA. They just contacted their contacts and just said, hey, can you somehow provide us the format? And of course they could, because other places do that. And so then I think, so nothing earth shattering. It's not rocket science, but that's kind of the first software that I wrote.
So, I'm curious. So you come up with this idea, you do this thing, and you probably feel really great about yourself when you're done with it, because you get that pump, right? When you showed it to somebody who wasn't technical, what was their response?
Well, they were actually super.
That's great.
This took hours for these, for the people to type into the CUNA program. We're super happy that they didn't have to do that. And then, fortunately, the people I worked for, they very much rewarded, people who looked around the problem and solved it. So they were actually tickled with that. And so, it was just super successful experience all around.
That's one of my favorite things in the world it's one of my favorite and one of my least favorite things to do in the world is like show technology concepts to people that don't know anything about tech. Like my wife, for instance, like, you know, she knows enough about tech, but she doesn't know like enough to like, I guess, quote unquote, care. So like I'll talk about things, and sometimes she picks it up, and sometimes she doesn't. But you know, sometimes I'll explain something in just the right way, and she'll find like a really good analogy, and it'll just click. And that's like, I think that's one of the reasons why I've been so interested in kind of like educating in tech. It's like you see the light on come on, you like see the light come on for people, and you know, I think, you know, one of the things that is interesting to me, especially about like that background, is like you took it upon yourself, right? Like you didn't have a job, and then their job's like, okay, Dave, we need you to write a program that does this. You're like, I see this value. I see value in fixing this particular problem with technology. And I think that's one of the great things about tech. It's like, you know, problem solving is the job. If you like to solve problems.
Favorite places to work are the places that recognize that. So I'm a person who believes in sort of taking ownership and like we see a problem, solve a problem. Don't wait for it to be directed or necessary, depending on what it is. And so I've worked with some people who are with some, you know, employers who are very positive. And then, you know, maybe a like, you know, is like, don't step out of your lane. And I didn't stay there.
Sure.
But yeah, I love that. I love that when I see that in people that, you know, that I supervise, just people who are thinking about the problem and thinking about, you know, where that is, and thinking about making their life better, as opposed to thinking about, you know, 5 o'clock. Like those are the people I love to work with. That's the person I love to be, and the people who I love to work for.
I mean, I'm very similar. Like, I think also there's something about taking pride in what you do as well. And I'm not saying that everybody has to like, you know, love to write code, or, you know, I have no problem with people that they come in at 9 and they do their job and they're great, and they leave at 5 and they're able to separate. I've never been like that. I've been very much of the like, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day, and it's like, I don't even know if I even considered other jobs. Like, you know, I got a computer. And then like I grew up during like the, you know, the web 2.0 days. So like building websites was a thing. And I built a website once, and I was like, I can't do anything else other than this. I have to do this. Right. And, you know, and to the point, my dad's not technical, obviously. I don't know why I said obviously, but my dad is not technical. And I remember like, when, you know, I was doing websites. Like my first job was kind of building website type things. And to this day, he's like, oh, you're still building websites? Like, no, Dad, I don't build websites. I haven't built a website in a long time.
It thinks of what you do.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not, and it's honestly, it's not worth it to kind of deconstruct, because sometimes I struggle with like, okay, what does Isaac actually do? But websites, it just works because, I mean, if I needed to build a website, I still could. I just don't. But
for sure.
So at what point, like, you know, you mentioned a few things that kind of at your intro, like, you know, you've worked at a couple of different places, and, you know, you wrote books. Like when was like the time frame for when like you realized like, oh, I'm starting to get really good at this, and I want to kind of share the knowledge that I have with other people?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me think back to when the books happened. I want to say they were, I did the books probably between 10 and 15 years into my career. So it was, you know, it was a fair piece. And all I can remember thinking at the time was like, well, I want to write a book someday, so I should probably get action letters out of the way. Like that's literally what I said to myself. And so let's just first of all, find out how you even get, you know, reach out to get a rejection letter. Like, how does that even work?
Yeah.
And so I was just for other reasons, books website, which, you know, back in the day was like, you know, it's like my favorite. And so I was looking at that, looking at some books, looking at all the books that I wanted, and said, write for us. So I clicked on that. Yeah. And so then it was just this like here's what we want from your submissions. And first of all, everybody has something to say. Here's what that should look like. And so they talked about doing the outline and wanted it dressed in there, and even like talking about what other books are in that market and whatever things you'd expect. And so I put together an outline, a proposal book that ended up being called CDO and MAPI Programming with Visual Basic 6. It probably was. I don't know. But anyway, so I wrote that out and I sent that, and I'm like, all right. Oh, and they said, it can be up to a couple weeks before. Well, so like the next day or the day after that, I got an email back from O'Reilly, and they said, well, a little, I don't remember what they said. I'll just say week. They didn't say week, but it's like, it was my first proposal. Not surprising. It's like I didn't really know what I was doing. So, but it says, but we think this is a book we want to publish. I'm like, oh my God. So that actually did
interesting.
End up getting published. Yeah, it was fantastic. And they were super good to work with. And he was really good about, making good suggestions in his book. Like he kept my voice in it, and he did that. I think he didn't ask for things that weren't actually needed. And so we did that, and that, I don't know, maybe 10 months or so, write that, and I was still working, and so then that was published, and that was cool. And that book was basically about writing email-enabled applications using Visual Basic 6. Different landscape today, but yeah. So then after that was published, then they contacted me, and so this was around 2000, 99, 2000. They probably contacted me in 2000 and said, hey, we've got some stuff we want you to look at under NDA with Microsoft about possibly writing another book. That's what turned into .NET. So like they weren't even calling it .NET at the time.
Sure.
They were calling it like ComPlus 2.0, and so that was great, because then we did the NDA, and then from them talking about sort of the technology, and it was like, not like it was mostly baked, but like it didn't have the fit and finish or the polish and things. Like Visual Studio hadn't been upgraded to be able to do .NET apps and things like that. So we were building from the command. And then I, along with probably a couple hundred other authors, flew out to Redmond, technical presentations from like the technical project managers from the teams that were implementing .NET. So like it was amazingly fantastic, and I got to meet some people out there. I met sold of I forget the book, canonical book on Windows programming in C to begin with, later C. So like he was a big name at the time. Like his book had sold like 500,000 copies. Like it was amazing. So he was out there thinking about what books he was going to write for .NET. So that was just a beautiful experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. And as somebody who's kind of built their career on .NET, like I think, I've had opportunities to talk with people, that were around during that time and around during when .NET started to kind of build all this traction. And it's always great to kind of hear like these stories of like, what it was like, playing around with bits that weren't ready, and you're signing these NDAs and all these sort of things. But I do have a question about like the O'Reilly thing, because one of the things that I love about O'Reilly books is that you get to, like, all the books have like an animal or something on the front of them. Yeah. And I looked just,
you're gonna ask me about my animal?
Do you get to pick the animal, or do they give you, like, they just tell you what the animal is?
So so that was really interesting. Now, of course, this was years ago, so I don't know what their current day process is, but at the time they had one person, and she had the final say over the. Sometimes she, and I apologize, I don't remember her name, but she had the final say, and also just lots of times she just picked the animal. Now, for my first book, it was so cheap. I didn't have a preference, but my theory about why. So I got a duck, first cover.
Mm-hmm.
And so my theory about why she picked the dove is because my dedication was to peace. Dedicated my book to peace, and so I think that prompted her to pick a dove. So I don't know about that. And then my second book was either a catfish, or the reason I say
It's a catfish. Yeah.
the catfish. You remember the
I just looked. I just looked because I was curious.
You just looked. Nice.
Yeah.
So I think she might have told me it was a dogfish, and so I was telling people it was a dogfish, and somebody said to me, "Oh no, that's a cat." Like I didn't remember, but yeah. So, and I have no idea. Where that came from. And sometimes, like with all the books being her, like she just might randomly pick something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or I also think she had access to old archive of those line drawings that was out, right. And so I think it might just be, what's the next one I haven't used? So I have no idea. I'm not speaking for her. I wonder these things myself.
Yeah, like it's funny because like those drawings remind me, like I can't remember what the name of the book is, but at one of the museums that I was at recently, like it had like one of the original copies of like Birds of the World or something like that, where it's like from the 1800s and it's a giant book and all the birds are hand drawn. Yeah, it's like I think it's like the National Audubon Society like book or something like that. And I just remember whenever I look at like O'Reilly books, I immediately think of that because it's like the detail is so great and it makes you just like. But I'm always curious because, like, to your point with the catfish, it's like, why a catfish? Like, it's just so funny. So anyway, tangent about writing books for O'Reilly because I was just generally curious.
And I want to say too that O'Reilly was a great, great, as you'd expect, a great organization. Tim O'Reilly is a great figure in our industry, and I really am impressed with when the publishing industry kind of started to change, sort of the changes that the media went through for the community. So just shout out.
Yeah, I mean that brings up a good point. Maybe I'd like to get your thoughts on it. Like obviously, there was a point in time where like the only way that you can learn was buying, like going to the bookstore and buying a book, right? And now, it's funny because I've been asked to write books a few times, and I've said no, not because of the money or anything like that, but it's like I don't think I can actually like physically do the 6 months of work it takes to write a book.
A lot of work. Like it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Like I don't think that I have like the mental like endurance to do that. Like I would just get bored and just, throw away a 200 pages of nonsense. So like, and so because the way my brain works is I'm far more interested in other forms of content for learning. Short form written content or video content or what have you, right? So I'm curious, like for somebody who has kind of seen the progression from like, okay, books are the only real way, books and magazines, to now you can watch a 30-second TikTok or you can watch a 4-hour Twitch stream or you can all these things. Like, how do you learn? Like, what is the way that you learn best now?
Yeah. So, I don't, it's not so much through books anymore. Like early in my career, I always had a book in my hand back when people read physical books. But wherever I went, I always had a technical book with me in case I had a few minutes to read or whatever. Now, not so much. I rarely read technical books at all. And I do tend to get my information is training videos. So there's been a day back in the book times. Another way we got is we flew somewhere to a 1 week training session, and somebody presented in front of your desk, and so we'd have a few labs throughout the day, and so that was great. Now I don't think you have that at all anymore. But these companies did sort of morph into sort of producing training materials, and I think those are great. I'm not as much of YouTube training, although there is some very good YouTube. But I subscribe I mean, it's okay if I say the service I use, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, pluralsight.com. And I think I landed there just because I went to one of their conferences 20 years. I liked
Sure.
that teacher, Matt Milner, in case he's still out there. And like, okay, when they sort of notified the people that they were doing, they were sort of morphing into this online. I checked out. Anyway, I've enjoyed it. I think they have high quality training. And so I just like, so with that video, you can you can put it at 2x speed and whatever, and as long as you're paying attention, you can get through it faster. Anyway, so that's the answer to your question, is like it's pretty much online video training, usually Pluralsight. Often, if it is YouTube, I'll stick with sort of the players like the Microsoft channel, or US channel, or whatever, because they put effort into the quality of their materials. So yeah, that's it. Video, and then of course, goes without saying, just around with stuff, just trying to something happen.
Yeah, no, I think that I'm a similar way. Like I like to, at some point, I do like to follow along, like the Pluralsight sort of style, where like you're kind of watching somebody's screen and you kind of follow along with them. But I totally agree with the fact that it's like, you're not going to learn unless you try.
Oh yeah, you got to do it yourself, for sure.
Yeah. And, and also the trying, like it allows you to kind of think about like, okay, do I have a problem that I can solve with this technology? Right. Like I've gone through so many like Hello World tutorials and getting started tutorials, and I always have not really enjoyed them because I'm not really, I don't have like a connection to the assignment, if that makes sense. And and I say this to people when like, oh, like I want to be a developer, or like I'm like, find a problem that you're trying to solve. Because if you go and you take up like a Python course, or you take a JavaScript course or whatever, and they're walking you through like the example, and you don't like feel any connection to the example, like you're not going to remember any of it.
And it's all passive. You're gonna think you understand everything they're saying, and you're gonna do it, and it's gonna work. And then tomorrow you're not gonna remember.
That's right.
Yourself.
That's right.
Whereas if you do it from scratch, that's an active form of learning, of course. And so now you're thinking about, how's this supposed to work? And then when it doesn't quite work, you're figuring out, you're fixing it, you're debugging and whatever. And that's huge, like it's an order of magnitude difference in what you come away with.
Yeah. And you said something interesting now, because I think we were talking a little bit about before we got started, is like now we're in this world where a lot of the things you just listed, AI does for you. Right. It's like, okay, like okay, writing the boilerplate code, fixing the bugs, completing, even if I have like an idea, typing in a comment, like, so, and this is not to put you on the spot to make you have a spicy comment, but it's like, how do people,
I've got all the spicy comments.
Yeah. How do people in technology, like getting started, learn today? Do you think? Like, I've talked to a lot of people, and it's very interesting. Like, because a lot of I guess when I was learning to be a developer, like the things that like helped me actually learn are done for me now.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. And I think it is going to have to be figured out. I think people will figure it out. Like there are people who are, who there is learning, it's like, how do you teach adults and whatever. But I think obviously our field is a state of change right now, and there's no glossing over that. Like it's in a big time state of change. Like I often say now, what I was hired to do 5 years ago doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it probably exists, but it doesn't exist in a lot of places anymore. And that's because, so I'm a big fan of Claude from Anthropic. I have a personal account that I pay for, and I use that a lot. I use it in my personal passion project, and I've also begun to use it at work. And so what do I use it for? Well, we all know it's like, well, if you need to say something like, write me in such and such language that does some XYZ relatively small thing, like that's trivial. We've been doing, what I've been experimenting with lately is larger, actually even project level creations from Claude. And so I own sort of techniques where I'm able to sort of project and coalesce it into a thing that I can upload into what Anthropic calls a Claude project. A Claude project is just something that you can upload various sort of rounding documents in, let's say, and then you can have conversations about the context of those documents. So one of my documents now, when I'm doing this kind of programming, is entire .NET solution that's sort of been, because you can't like just upload a .NET solution or upload a folder and get every just because the web interface doesn't offer that. But I can sort of, I have this script that sort of folder recursively and aggregates the printable files to do a thing that actually readers between the documents. And I found that when I upload that to Claude, Claude is able to reason over that set of C# files, etc. And then I can say, okay, well, first of all, I can take something that I didn't write, explain this to me, or even, create an architecture document for me.
Yeah.
I was able to output things in the mermaid format, which is a visual format. So yeah, I can do that, but I can also say, okay, now I need to add this feature, or I need guy, or etc. And so Claude's actually able to understand and not just give me a snippet of code, but say, okay, if this endpoint, what it'll do is it'll actually look across the whole set, and it'll understand where internally, the things internally that endpoint could be implemented in terms of, and sort of write the whole pipeline of code and just hand it over to me, and I can just copy it into the project, and that usually works first time.
Yeah.
Maybe surprisingly, yeah.
Yeah, it is terrifying sometimes when you get the prompt just right and it gives you exactly what you want, and there's literally zero edit that's involved. I'm curious
totally.
as to yeah, go ahead.
I often think that, like, so I think of Claude. I try to talk to Claude in the way that I would talk to an intern, a smart intern. And I find that if I'm good at doing that, Claude actually gives me, code that's equivalent to what maybe a smart or very smart intern would give me. In other words, it's probably correct. It may be insightful, because an intern might just give you crap. So and Claude can, well, not Claude, LLM, not just Claude, but any LLM can, as we know, can give you crap.
Yeah, I'm curious as to know, like, what others, like, obviously you kind of you set on Claude. Like, did you play around with ChatGPT or some of the other models like Llama, or did you kind of, that was the first one and you're like, oh, this works pretty good?
So I someone who's done any sort of exhaustive testing or whatever. So this is just me as an individual developer talking about my experience. Particularly since they're changing, like they're everything all the time. So so don't take my word for it. But my experience, I started with ChatGPT because that's what we were hearing about, and I paid for that for a while, and of experience or certain level of quality that, and hard to say that, it's just a feeling. And then I heard about Claude. I don't remember when or how I heard about Claude, tried it out, and my personal experience was it just felt smarter. We were connecting more. I don't mean that on a personal level. I just mean that Claude was connecting with my description of a problem set, and then smart things about it. And I'm like, well, this is, it did feel more like what ChatGPT was doing. Now, that was a year ago that I had those experiences. And so, who knows how I would compare the two today, but I've had no reason to move away from Claude. And, and evaluating them all, my interest. Like, I'm trying to get software made, both in my personal, in my daily work. I'm not trying to be like the expert on this model versus that model, or this version of that model versus that version of, yeah. And I did, I have looked into other models and llama, but I settled on Claude, and that's where I'm at.
Well, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, so your intuition is right. Like there's been exhaustive exercises, and Sonnet supposedly is the better LLM when it comes to like writing code. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I do think I've heard those doing that.
Yeah, right. I just think take a bit more credit. You're like, I had this feeling in my gut that Sonnet is far better. No, but I just think it's funny, like this entire space right now, it's like, it feels like there's all these LLMs out there and they're all kind of commodities, but they're really not commodities because they all do the more or less the same thing. The underlying ingredients are a bit different, but it's just like you need to know what this one is good for and what this one isn't good for, and don't do this one with too many tokens and so on and so forth, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
and I also, if like the thing that's the same is maybe the ingesting of the vast amounts of internet text, maybe they're all getting basically the same. I don't know what all sources they use, or the sources available are what they are, and they're probably trying to use all of the available sources. So I imagine what they're each using for that sort of initial training very similar, but what I imagine might be different then is secondary training, or the the human in the loop training, where they have human beings, and they these companies do hire sort of vast armies of human beings or to interact with the models, and then to instruct how to answer better, or not say not say hateful things.
Sure.
The question is, like, so then each company is deciding what they think is important to train for, and that's something where I could see among companies.
Yeah, it's this whole space to me is so interesting because it seems like it's kind of like a space race, right? Like who can get to the end goal as fast as possible by churning out the most optimized model that has the most parameters, that does the most thing, that and then something like DeepSeek happens and it's like, oh, we do all of this, but like it's substantially like less compute needed, and it's pretty fascinating.
For sure.
I think one of the things that I do want to talk about, we can talk. I want to drift back into the AI topic in a second, but I do want to just call out something, and that's how you and I met. So, yes, we kind of went straight into it, and I in my head I was like, oh, I should probably just talk about this. So, for folks that don't know this, is probably most don't. So Dave was actually one of the first people that I worked with, my first job out of college. And, one of the things that we did there is that we were working with all these different technologies. And one of the things that I always tell the story, and I was talking to Dave about this before, is like, Dave is kind of like one of my go-to examples of like the pain of being a developer. And I want to talk to you a little bit about, how do you, when you're struggling with tasks and when you're trying to work on something and it like you're trying to figure out a bug and it's taking a long time, like what are some of the coping mechanisms that you have? Because I think one of the things that I've talked with a lot of folks in this space for so long, it's like everybody deals with like obstacles a bit differently. So how do you deal with, when the code isn't doing what you want it to do?
I think this is an accident of my personality versus something that I figured out, but I'll just say what the experience is like. So for me, I always recommend to people, and I recommended to my kids, what you love, and the rest will figure itself out. So, and regardless of whether that's going to be something you think you can sell, we'll figure that out. For me, that's software development. And so the reason that's important is because then when I'm in the trenches of, and people are mad that it's not working, I still love the process. I even love the debugging process. Like, it doesn't have to be like is the whole experience. It's not just the success experience.
Yeah.
So the element of like figuring something out. Like, that's interesting. Human beings like to figure stuff out. What makes it hard is when other people are like putting pressure on. That's anyway. So that's one. Is that I like the whole process. And number two, somehow for some reason, I just believe that the answer is
Sure.
there. So it's like, I'll even say to I know that I'm looking at the answer. I know it's right here. And I don't know why I was able to get to that. But that is the experience I have. So I guess, like, if I guess even if you were sort of to artificially just say that, well, the answer is right. Well, and literally, it's obviously there.
Yeah.
The software works.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it's a hunt. And hunting, people enjoy, the experience of, I'm not a hunter of animals, but people enjoy looking for, let's say, Easter eggs. People enjoy
Yeah.
Easter egg hunts. And so there's that. And I think that's basically it. Long enough where, like, I think probably early in my career, I might have been like, oh, am I taking too long? Do I actually suck? Things like that. But like, in 35 years, like, you see a lot. You see other
Sure.
people, well, and finding things and whatever. And I've seen my own. I've been in all was lost, but then we got there. And actually, that was some good advice that I got early in my career. Like, trying to do a thing. It was like a several-month project, and I'm like, I said to my boss, I have no idea how we're going to do this. And she's like, that's okay. We're gonna. That's what we're doing along the way, is figuring out to know. And I'm like, that was really helpful to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I just feel like that we're going to get around to success experience.
I mean, that's great. I think that's also a very solid mindset to have, right? Like, yeah. I'm going to steal that. There are some alternate universe where this code works. Like, I'm stealing that. That's a really good one.
And I'm, on the physics side, I'm a believer in what the physicist Sean Carroll and the physicist David Deutsch say, which is the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics actually physically correct. Now, not everybody agrees with that, but I'm convinced. And the reason that matters is because, like, when I say there is a universe in which this works, I believe that there's a universe in which this works, and I just need to get there somehow.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's also a very like creative way to think about it, right? Like, there's nothing really that's impossible. It's just physics. Right.
Yeah. Speaking of David Deutsch, he says, if it's included by the laws of physics, then it's possible.
Yeah.
Like, or even inevitable. So yeah.
That's great. But I wanted to look at that little tangent, that little like side tangent, because I think it is important to call out that you are the muse to one of my favorite stories. You are the creator of one of my favorite stories that I talk about, right? Like, the story about Dave struggling trying to solve a bug, and it seemed like it was way too much time, but it was just the right amount of time to find that approach. So that kind of goes, takes me back to the AI conversation a little bit too, where it's like, now we're in this world where, like, just to take your example, right? Like the example that I was talking about, where you were trying to solve a bug, or it might not have even been a bug. It was just like something wasn't doing exactly what you were expecting it to do. And now, like, hypothetically, like, AI can help you. So the question then becomes, like, because if you go through that struggle yourself, like you're staring at that block of code and you're trying different permutations and it's still not working, it's not doing exactly what you want. But if some like AI swoops in and gives you the solution to the problem immediately, or pushes you towards the right answer, like, the question then becomes, like, what are you learning? Right?
Yeah, what are you learning? And then how does this new generation of develop the things we want them to create? I'm not worried at all, actually, Isaac. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is that so two things. One is that we are going to see a new skill set that's going to matter, and that skill set is directing interns or whatever. But is how do you direct them if you yourself in the way that you're asking them to do it? Like, I don't have the answer to that, but I have every confidence that we're going to find that, because people care about this. Like, just even the fact that you brought up the question means that we're not going to just let this go, right? Like, I had another friend, I was talking with another developer friend, who's worried about the same thing, and he's like, well, you know, you and I, he's about me and him, have the ability to sort of know where the LLM needs to go. But if we, just like you're saying, if we're not going to know that, and so people care about that. So one of the things I can think of, like, if you just think of, well, how would it's your job to solve it? Well, you might actually train up a team of people who actually learn in that way and learn LLMs. Like, we're not going to just drop the ball and just let whatever happen. And you know, people worry about, well, now LLMs are the only ones writing code, and so they're just going to learn from each other and generate into something that we don't like. Well, so do that, and we're not going to do that. People think about, you know, that's not acceptable. So what can we do? So one of them might be train up teams of, you know, highly paid people that learn how to do this so that they can train to the LLMs. That's one way. But also, I think that's just sort of a brute. And I'm convinced that people who in education will figure this out, just like with every other, you know, technological advance that that seems like it, you know, certain skills or whatever. We figured it out. And we've moved on. I'm 100% sure. And I realize that can sound past the graveyard and whatever, and I respect that. And I want to be part of the solution,
Sure.
but that's honestly where I think.
Well, I was going to say, like, you know, it seems to, and this is, you know, probably what you said a bit earlier, like a default of your personality or a defect of your personality, you know, being altruistic is a good thing, right? And you know, seeing the positives and everything, I maybe I'm a bit more on the other side, but it's one of those things where, you know, I see the immediate value. Like, I've been able to build things that I would not have been able to build like as quickly myself. And I learned how to do it along the way, because I think, to your point, like, I had this interest in learning how to do the thing already. This just kind of accelerated that learning. My concern, obviously, is, you know, when we go down this path of, oh, you have a deadline, you have to do this thing, and you have to get this feature out the door, and you take advantage of an assistant, and you're not as tuned in as to what the assistant is doing, and then you're potentially kind of using code that might not do exactly what you want. That's what my primary concern is. And it's not like, I'm not.
Also, by the way, that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, people are time constrained, and that's definitely good.
But people already told, like, people reminded me, it's like, what do you think Stack Overflow was 5 years ago? Right? Like, people have been copying and pasting code since the dawn of time. Right? So it's one of those things where it's, you know, two in the hand, half does, you know, was it half a dozen, six in the hand, half a dozen the other, or whatever, right? So, but, you know, I love, and, you know, one of the things I'd like to finish on is, like, you've been in this area for a while, right? Like, I remember when we were working together, you were naturally curious and you were building things in this space around NLP and language processing. Like, you know, I would love to kind of get your thoughts as to, like, you know, all the things that were in your head. I'd imagine that a lot of, like, things that you had thought about were limited by, like, what was capable, like, or was possible in technology. And now we're getting to this point where we're getting more and more capabilities. Like, is the vision that what you thought of when you were working on these things years ago, is it kind of close to what it is now? Or were you thinking so far in the future, like, you know, Jarvis in Iron Man sort of thing?
Well, for sure about Jarvis, you know, at the very beginning, because, again, for me, I wasn't thinking about a job or a business or anything like that. I was create a mind inside of my laptop.
Sure,
you know,
sure.
and you know, never had any idea of how to get anywhere near that, including myself. Yeah, so it's really interesting because when ET sort of hit the world publicly a few years ago now, I at first I was actually kind of depressed about it, because I'm like, well, I don't need to be working on my passion project anymore because they've solved it. But nothing could be further from the truth. And for me, that's because my project actually isn't about machine learning. Recent advances have been about machine learning. Before we had machine learning, we had something called rules symbolic AI, or good old-fashioned AI, GoFi for short.
Mm-hmm.
Ideas in that space. And I hesitate to say that to some developers, because some people have decided that machine learning is all that matters anymore.
Sure.
And that, we tried rule symbolic systems and it didn't work, and for various reasons. So we don't want that anymore. But I am utterly convinced that the next big steps, integration of these approaches. So my project is about converting free-form natural language to and from entity relation graphs. And ways that I do that, and there's ways that I make that sort of universal and get past some of the difficulties that were reached when that was done in the past. So I'm working on that, working on making a public offering on that. And optimism there. You're right, I'm an optimistic guy to begin with, but also there's I've had that lead me to, will be there soon. And the reason, and so I think this is important because things that people have identified as sort of the machine learning approach, the LLM approach, are the very things that this symbolic approach can circumvent or provide sort of another piece. That the stuff that doesn't work so well with this actually really nicely addressed by the machine learning. So I see a symbiosis between those two things, and I make an association. There's a book named Daniel Kahneman, and the book is called Thinking Fast and Slow, and it's about these two your brain has of approaching things. We sort of have the intuitive, like the fast, and then we have the thinking, several minutes to work on a math problem, things like that. It's sort of the conscious mind. That is analogous to what we have. We have the LLMs, which are the fast, intuitive way, not always accurate, or as accurate as we want them to be. We have like this rules-based way, that sort of the slow way of approaching things. It's the logical way. It's the way we can trace through the exact steps of reasoning that we're and how we got to where we were. We can have explanatory knowledge about our thinking mechanism. And so I think of it like I have this idea that at some point soon I'm going to call it AI fast and slow, and sort of talk about those sides of the equation.
Oh, I would buy it. I mean, I think it's one of the things that I think there is a valuable need in differentiating what these things do, what they're capable of, and what they don't do, and what they're not capable of.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things, and this, I'm partially at fault. I think a lot of people are partially at fault, is like hype train, right? It's like, oh, look at all the great things this thing can do. Like, it can give me a taco recipe, and then it can tell me like the best places to go when I'm in Europe, and all these sort of great things. But we sometimes forget, especially like if you don't know how LLMs work, it's just taking words and sequences of words, turning them into numbers, and then coalescing them in different ways. And once you think about it like that, the opportunity for you to understand, oh, okay, well, if it guesses the wrong number, it's the wrong letter, it's the wrong word, whatever, right? And I think that there's something to say about like what these things are capable of at this point in time and what they're not capable of. And I think that's why we're in this huge march to like AGI, right? Like everybody wants to get like this completely autonomous being, but it's like, remember, we're not close to there yet, right?
We're not. No, we're not.
Yeah. This is, I mean, this conversation has been awesome, Dave. I've been really, first off, it's great to catch up with you and see
Same.
and learn a little bit more about your background and see what you're doing. I think one of the things I'd like to end on is like, you've been doing this for a long time. And, if you think about, the 35 years or even longer, because you've been messing around with computers since you were a kid, right? Like, and you think about today as somebody in tech and then what the future is in somebody in tech, like what are some of the things that come to mind for you?
In terms of what people are gonna
Just like in the future,
or like what?
That's it.
Yeah.
Like what are some of the things that like you think of? And like obviously you're altruistic, so it's always going to be positive, but
So I do see computers in the relatively near future, maybe 5 short time, but for anybody know that the rate of technology increase is accelerating, because every time you create a new technology, you use that as part of your creation of the next technology. I think we will see. So I'll just put these out there. Not everybody's going to agree with this. I think we're going to see conscious computers. I think we're going to see universal basic income, because we're going to have this jobs issue, and I think that's good because I think it's very few of us that are fortunate enough to enjoy the jobs. I think a large portion of the population is not enjoying the coerced labor system, and would be okay with moving on to something else. What will we move on to? I think human creative and born with a strong desire to be at kids. They're always asking questions and they're always saying, can I help? And to some experiences growing up, sort of and so I think what, and just to bring this home, happen is that human beings are going to have the space in which to be the creative, productive individuals that we're born to be.
Yeah.
So I think a whole new order of magnitude of that kind of human beings. I don't think computers are going to replace human beings at all. I think, well, except where they want to be. I don't want to, downplay that there is also possibility for negative experiences, but I think as a society, as a world, I think we're going to see that it means something wholly different and better to be a human being.
Sign me up for that. Oh my goodness. This conversation has been great. Like I said, for folks that, I highly, Dave, you gotta talk about, you gotta be out there more. Like, this is part of the time where I usually say, like, if you want to learn more about what Dave's doing, find them. But you don't talked about.
Here at the link. I don't have any links.
Yeah, we talked about this. You don't got a lot of links, but like, I think that,
hit me up. Seriously though, hit me up on LinkedIn if anybody actually was sort of motivated by this and wants to just.
Yeah, and there'll be a link. There'll be a link to where you can find Dave on LinkedIn down below. This has been great. Before we sign off, my friend, do you have any parting words?
No, Isaac. Like, I think we said it all. It's been great. It's been great to reconnect with you and relive some of that. So like I said before the call, I've been excited to see the kinds of things you're working on. So thank you for inviting me.
Of course. It was a pleasure. And thank you everybody for tuning in with us right now and the folks that are listening in the future. So for my friend Dave Grundgeiger, my name is Isaac Levin, and this has been Coffee and Open Source. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Take care.